Hello, everybody. My name is Kyle Kaufenberg, and today I'm going to be talking about community security. There we go. So, what is community security? So, community safety and security, according to the United Nations Development Program, or UNDP, is basically a concept that seeks to operationalize human security, human development, and state building paradigms at the local level. So, what this basically means, narrowly defined, is both group and personal security. It focuses on ensuring that the communities and the community members are free from fear. This is allowing state governments to basically ensure that their community feels as if they're safe and they're not being threatened on a daily basis. So, for community security, we're going to be going over needs, vulnerabilities, and capacities. And one of the biggest things that is being brought up for community security is VPSOs. So, VPSOs. What is a VPSO? So, a VPSO, or Village Public Safety Officer, or VPSO program, are basically paid volunteers. So, what this means, VPSOs that are paid volunteers will they're they have the power to make arrests. They have the responsibility of law enforcement, firefighting, and a little bit of other emergency response types they're in charge of doing. Basically, it came from the fact that in Alaska, in the Fairbanks area, there's a lot of rural communities and areas where there's no service, and that stems from no law enforcement. There stems from no fire departments in that area that are able to respond and help those little villages. These villages could either train their own, or they could possibly even hire from outside, and they're able to basically have their own private contract of workers. The only downside is that they're paid very little. I believe it's about $14 an hour for the record that they're required to fill, and all it stemmed from is that the public safety system currently, especially in the Fairbanks area, is very poor, and that it has no real funding for them themselves. Some of the things that occur with the VSPOs, is that there is insufficient funding in the fact that, of course, they get grants from the government in different parts to help out those villages, but again, not 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 nothing that can sustain itself. Infrastructure, housing, there's usually not much for these people for stations wise. They don't have rooms or bunks or anything like that. They have a high turnover rate. People leave very quickly once they realize that this is not for them and they cannot do all the challenges that are presented in a very efficient manner of being a firefighter and a police officer, or not a police officer, but a peace officer. The training for these individuals is very extensive, and it's also expensive. So they are not able to. Also, I notice it's VPSO, not VSPO. It's very expensive, and they are unable to sustain that. So, combined with having a high turnover rate, being very expensive, there's low salaries, and another thing is that they can take this job. It doesn't transition from themselves to being a firefighter or even being a police officer. So, they're very big challenges that will come into to play here. Also, in the United States, Fairbanks especially, it is one of the highest crime rates in the entire United States. 885 over 100,000 people have been involved in a violent crime. More than a third of communities in Alaska have no police at all. And this really stems from the native communities. A lot of the larger cities, such as Fairbanks, North Pole, or even Anchorage, they obviously have their own paid departments. So they don't have the very difficulties or different challenges that VPSOs have, which is the lack of power. And they also, VPSOs, are not allowed to move between villages. They're only allowed to be in their own village. That really just goes to effect for the actual VPSO themselves. So next we're going to talk about strategies and solutions, or things that will basically allow what we can do to fix these types of things, and how do we can keep the gap of VPSO and paid officers. So strategies and solutions. We have law enforcement, training, and grants. So we can get rid of VPSOs altogether by increasing the law enforcement in the area of the Fairbanks area. We can have increased presence of law enforcement, which would therefore return this rape culture that Alaska has or Fairbanks has. We can move that down. We can actually move and allow basically allow for more coverage and reduce our crime rates. If law enforcement is not the answer, we can start with little steps for VPSO. There are grants that the VPSOs can get. So if we can have FEMA start recognizing VPSOs and distributing it from other agencies to them, increasing the training as well. So VPSOs are a bridge between law enforcement and fire departments, so having them with the ability to have better, basically EMS and firefighting skills. So they need to be better trained and better equipped to do something, and in doing so, they need increased salaries. And all in all, if they need the solution for VPSOs is either for the villages themselves to become, or asking for fire departments and law enforcement personnel to cover them. I believe it comes down to that. But if they can't, they're hiring these VPSOs, which do the same thing. That is pretty much some of the most important things. VPSOs and community security, it's going to be affecting, not having law enforcement or firefighting in their area is going to affect their physical security, health security, economic, political, and basically every security is affected by not having some sort of protection from criminals. Another thing, speaking of criminals, is that most people that are becoming these officers or these VPSOs are criminals themselves. Nobody is applying to become a VPSO because of the high turnover rates, because of the low wages, because of the low training, because of how poor the transitions from any other job. The only people that are allowed to apply or are allowed getting jobs are not criminals. Now you have criminals in the infrastructure that is supposed to protect you, but now these are the ones that are going to be harming you and abusing power. So either having departments, law enforcement, AST, or having county departments or borough departments come and protect the villages. If that is not able to happen, they need to start training these VPSOs to be more of a combination of getting better at firefighting, get better at law enforcement. Their training needs to get better. They need to acquire grants so they can prove for their funding. They need to pay them more. These are the solutions that can help bring VPSOs into a respectable career, and then they can actually transition from VPSOs into law enforcement or firefighting careers. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation. Hope you guys have a good night or good week.